Something that I've realized in my years of working with various forms of digital art mediums is that they really lack a connection to the real world, which is something that most other art forms have, and something that this art form never will. That is, until you adapt your artwork to have a real world counterpart. And in my case, I'm going to be translating pixels to plush. Now, off the bat, I had no idea how I was going to complete this project. In order to get a real-world copy of Steg, I needed to 3D print him, but I didn't have access to a 3D printer. That's when I received an email from one of my viewers named Aiden. Aiden told me that he watched some of my live streams from a while back, and in one of them I said that I wanted to 3D print some of my creations. So he offered to 3D print something for me. The moment I saw this email, I jumped to my keyboard and started to reply with so much excitement. I sent him the files for Steg, and lo and behold, a few days later, a package arrived on my doorstep. Alright, I was just in the middle of working on the Simplicity September 2018 webpage when the package arrived with Steg in it. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and open this up. Hopefully Steg didn't get damaged. Came all the way from Arizona here to Illinois. Right here he is. Come on, Steg. Get out of the bubble wrap. It's hard doing things with one hand. Is this like a bag? Oh, it is a bag. There we go. And there he is. Wow, he has a surprising amount of weight to him. He looks, yeah, undamaged. This is so cool. Oh man, I'm so excited to get started. So here we have the beautiful Steg 3D print, thank you very much to Aiden, and we're ready to move on to the first step in order to prepare Steg for molding. So from a distance the model looks pretty good, but when you get up close to it you can see that there are actually quite a few 3D printing errors, especially along the bottom here where the 3D printer couldn't quite keep up with the incline that the 3D model takes. Obviously, we really don't want strange deformities like this in our silicone mold, so I have to find a way to smooth them out before moving further, and that's where XTC 3D comes in. This awesome substance is kind of like a clear coat that helps smooth out the surface of our model, including 3D printing striations and deformations. The first thing I tried to do was glue Steg onto his stick. That way I could hold him by the stick and paint him like a little Steg shish kebab. But after a little bit of experimentation and multiple failures, well, I think this sums it up pretty well. Crap. Well, I guess we could give it a shot without the stick. So XTC 3D comes with a few different things. It's got part A and part B, which are supposed to be mixed 2:1 by volume. Part A being 2. It comes with a nice little mixing cup, brush thing, and a little mixing stick, and I guess I now have an extra mixing stick myself. So let's go ahead and get started. So I don't know exactly how much of this is going to be needed to cover the entirety of Steg. So it's going to be a little bit of a long shot, but I think what I'm going to aim for is somewhere around 15 milliliters to start with. Looks like lotion. There are so many different types of measurements on this cup that they provide, which is very nice. Part B is more fluid-like. It's kind of like vegetable oil. And there we go. 15 milliliters. Ooh, that has a stench. Oof, wow, that... I don't know what that smells like, but it is not good. So we'll start mixing this up here. So one thing that I did read was important while using this stuff is not to place the model on anything that might be porous or easily stickable like this. So if I were to put this gunk onto Steg and then put them here, that probably wouldn't be good because then this stuff would stick to Steg. So instead use something plastic or silicone or rubber like a baking sheet, or in this case I'm using a plastic placemat that's way old and nobody cares about. There you go, so we'll throw that stick right there. And then we got our sponge brush and we're gonna start applying. Here it goes. From here on, there is no going back. There we go, and that just slaps right on there. But anyway, I'm just going to keep on painting Steg here, trying to cover all the details, every face with a good coat. And I'll get back to you when I'm done and share my results. Steg ended up looking great after the application of the XTC 3D. There were some slight bumps in the road though. For one, a lot of the excess XTC 3D began to run down Steg and puddle around his feet. So, in order to get rid of it, I just took a toothpick and swept some of it away. It worked surprisingly well. I also wish I would have worn a pair of gloves while working on this. This stuff is super sticky, just like super glue, and it sticks to your fingers like super glue does too. A pair of gloves would have completely voided that issue. Anyway, I'm gonna let Steg cure here for the night. I'm gonna come back sometime tomorrow, and hopefully he will be good. Bye, Steg. See you tomorrow. Oh, I can't. We're right there. It's Steg, and there's also a rainbow on my neck. Woo! And up he comes. Alright, so here is the final Steg. As you can see, he is one shiny boy because that XTC 3D did a fantastic job at filling in all the different striations. Now, in the reflection of the light, you still can see the striations, and it might not look like this did too good of a job, but if you feel it, it feels buttery smooth. Now, that being said, there were still some areas that had some issues. One of those being the feet. There are some areas where there's like a very thin film of XTC 3D sitting on this stuff that I'll have to peel off. You can also see that the puddles also kind of made the feet seem very like sharp, I guess. Like it's a very sharp straight up drop to flatness. So I'll have to smooth that down as well. And then also on the tail of Steg here, it's kind of hard to see. It helps if I put my hand behind it. Basically, the XTC 3D started pooling up at Steg's tail, and there's a small bead of just pure XTC 3D just sitting on the tail there, so I'll have to sand that down so he doesn't have a weird droopy tail. But other than that, I think Steg came out pretty dang well from the 3D coating, so I'm excited to get started with the modeling portion of this, or sorry, not the modeling portion, the molding portion of this, which I will be doing tomorrow with some friends. While waiting to start molding, I sanded down Steg's tail, feet, and underside. That way we'd have a nice smooth model to work with when we started molding. I just used a standard 80 grit sanding block for sanding, so it wasn't anything special. The end result was a nice smooth Steg, ready for molding.
You sure we didn't buy cardboard?
I know, right? Alright, so, because we bought cheap wood and it split like 10,000 times, we're just gonna hot glue this thing shut. Basically, this is going to prevent any of the silicone from seeping out when we don't want it to, and it's also gonna help hold the box together. The next thing we have to do is find a way to prop Steg up, right? Because if we have Steg sitting on the bottom of the mold or on the top of the mold, issue is he's going to, either his feet or something's gonna be sticking out of the mold. So in order to do that, I just fashioned a little stand for him made out of PVC pipe, and I'm just gonna go ahead and glue that onto his base. We got that done. Now we just need to glue it into the bottom of our box. So I'm going to glob this up real heavy on this end because we do not want this coming loose. Into the center. Keep some pressure while the glue dries. All right. I'm gonna let that sit very still because I don't want it to shake at all, because I don't want it to fall over, because that would be no good. With the box made and Steg mounted, it was time to start mixing the silicone. Similar to the XTC 3D, the MoldMax 30 had a part A and a part B, supposed to be mixed at a ratio of 10:1 by weight. Gosh, I don't want this to run on the side. I don't think it will, but... Whoa! That is satisfying to watch. 1/10 of 2.4 kilograms. So we should be going up to about 2,652. Here, take a look at that. What does that look like? Fruit punch, would you say?
I can see my reflection.
You can see your reflection. Actually, I'm gonna take this off the scale, and we're gonna get mixing. I feel like I'm making, what is that stuff? Oobleck. We ended up letting the bucket sit for about 10 or 15 minutes to let the bubbles rise to the top. It actually worked surprisingly well. From there, we just gave Steg a good coating of silicone, scraped whatever we could out of the bucket, and set them out to cure for the next 24 hours. Alright, it's time to back the screws out, and hopefully see how the mold went, crossing my fingers that nothing got screwed up. I started by backing all of the screws out of the box, but trust me when I say this thing was stuck solid. It was next to impossible for me to get the side panels off the silicone mold. I mean, just look at what happened here when I got all of the sides off. There's nothing even holding this block on here, but it is stuck to the board. Wow. And there we go. There's our little spout leading to Steg. So I'm gonna give this a wash to get some of the residue off of it and all the other stuff, and we'll look at it then. As I was cleaning up, I decided I might as well clean up the mold a little bit too by just taking a razor blade and cutting off the edges. Kind of like the bevel modifier of the mold making world, if you will. Once the edges had been cleaned up, I took a craft knife and started cutting Steg out. It was actually quite a long process, and it was quite tedious as well. But I had a good audiobook to listen to while I was working. Here was my final mold. As you can see, I kind of cut zigzags into it, and this is just to help the mold stay together when we're actually casting. Other than that, the inside was super smooth, and the mold snapped together perfectly. I was super proud of this, and I couldn't wait to test it out with some foam. In order to cast the stress balls, I decided to use a material called Flex Foamit 3, which is basically just a flexible polyurethane foam. Similar to some of the other substances we used earlier, it has a part A and a part B intended to be mixed in a 1:2 ratio by volume. Now this stuff has an extremely short pot life, meaning that after only a few seconds, it'll already start to cure. So I decided to prepare everything beforehand. I took my silicone mold, threw 2 slabs of wood on the outside, and wrapped rubber bands around it to hold it shut tight so nothing would leak out the sides. From there, I took part A and part B, mixed them together in a sort of communal mixing cup, and then dumped them into the mold. Then, I waited for it to start expanding. Except, it didn't really expand at all. Upon cracking open the mold, I was met with a severely deformed version of Steg, one that didn't have any legs at all and instead just kind of had a really strangely shaped belly. He also didn't feel nearly as soft as I thought Flex Foam was supposed to feel. He felt more like something you'd find in packaging material than something that you'd find in a stress ball or a plush squishy toy. I thought about it for a little, thinking about what possibly could have caused this to happen, but then it hit me. I had mixed a 1:1 ratio of the Flex Foamit 3 instead of a 1:2 ratio. So I started up a second batch right away. This time, I made sure to mix it in a 1:2 ratio, and I also threw in a little bit of green dye to spice things up a little bit. It still didn't expand quite as much as I needed it to, meaning that I needed a little bit more of the mixture, but the result was significantly more promising, and it didn't really feel like styrofoam anymore. After a few days of testing out all sorts of different ratios and combinations and methods, I finally figured out the workflow that worked best for my mold. I ended up mixing part A to part B at a 4:7 ratio, and I mixed about 60 milliliters each time I ran it. From there, I'd pour as much of the mixture as I could into the mold, and then I'd plug it with a paper towel. I'd pick the mold up, shake it around, flip it upside down, and make sure that the foam covered every single surface feature of the inside of the mold. I did have to be careful though, because plugging holes on a mold can cause gas to build up inside and it can literally explode out. I actually had this happen to me while I was testing things, and I got Flex Foamit 3 all over my face and my hair, and let me tell you, it is not fun to pick out of your hair. Anyway, you'll know that you've done it properly when a bunch of Flex Foamit starts pouring out of the top of the mold. By the way, this is kind of what it looks like up close. It's got a pretty cool texture to it. By the end, I was pulling out pretty consistent Stegs, all of which felt like a stress ball. Unsurprisingly, painting was actually the easiest step in this entire process. All I had to do was put a few coats of white Plasti-Dip on, and then I just followed it up with a metallic gold paint from Rust-Oleum's Universal Metallic line of paints, which is a really great colored rubberized paint that works really well for projects like this. But of course, I had to make sure that this paint was actually strong before I sent them out to anybody. So I unfortunately had to sacrifice one of my only slightly deformed stegs to durability testing. And surprisingly, it held up extremely well. Of course, I couldn't just abuse a steg like that and leave it, so I gave him an extra coat of paint to help heal some of his wounds and to patch him up just a little bit. In fact, I actually started to like this steg so much that I decided I'm gonna keep him here with me in the beautiful city of Milwaukee. Boy was I happy with how these guys came out. It gives you such a special and a proud feeling to be able to hold something that you created in a digital environment. And not only that, but it was great to break out of the standard 3D workflow because you're used to sitting in front of screens, but this forces you to get out there, use your hands, puts your brain through new situations, and overall is just a fantastic experience to go through. If you ever have the opportunity to do something like this with one of your own 3D models, I'd absolutely recommend doing it. It does get a little bit pricey, especially for the silicone and the polyurethane foam products, but in the end, I had so much fun with this. I think it was absolutely worth however much money I threw down for it. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you get a chance to do something like this yourself in the future, and until next time, adios.